At my wedding, my brother threw champagne, smashed my cake, and yelled, I stayed silent, and what happened next left everyone stunned. I'm Nora Bennett, 31 years old, and my wedding day was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Instead, it turned into a public spectacle I'll never forget. Everything was perfect, the music, the lights, the laughter, until my brother stormed to the center of the reception floor, grabbed a bottle of champagne, and poured it over my head. The crowd gasped as he smashed the wedding cake with his bare hands, shouting, You think you're too good for us now? I stood frozen, champagne dripping down my dress, my heart pounding, while my parents rushed to calm him down instead of protecting me. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I stayed silent. Everyone thought I was in shock, but my silence wasn't weakness. It was the calm before the storm. What happened next changed everything, and none of them saw it coming. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, in a cramped two-bedroom apartment above my parents' corner diner. My father, William Bennett, worked grueling hours flipping burgers and manning the grill, while my mother, Diane, handled the morning rush and dealt with suppliers. I was the oldest of two. My brother Kyle, for years younger, was the one who could do no wrong in their eyes. When I was 13, Dad threw out his back lifting a commercial freezer, and suddenly he couldn't work the long shifts anymore. The diner's mounting bills fell on Mom's shoulders and quietly on mine too. I'd race home after school to help seat customers, wipe down booths, and take phone orders for takeout. I started tutoring neighborhood kids for $10 an hour, and every single dollar went toward buying cooking oil, napkins, or whatever else we were running short on that week. Kyle, meanwhile, treated the place like his personal ATM. He'd slip 20s from the register when no one was looking, vanish for hours with his buddies, then show up wearing brand new Jordans or carrying the latest gaming console. Whenever I pointed it out, Dad would wave me off. He's just a kid, Nora. Boys will be boys. He'll straighten out eventually. Except he never did. By high school, I was the one keeping everything together. I paid the electric bill when Mom came up short. I covered the quarterly health inspection fees. I worked weekends at a coffee shop downtown and tutored after school, squirreling away every cent I could for college. Call barely scraped by in his classes, yet Mom would beam whenever he managed to turn in an assignment on time. See? He's really trying, she'd say, as if effort alone deserved a trophy, when my acceptance letter to Portland State University arrived with a partial scholarship. I thought my parents would be proud. Instead, Mom's face fell. Who's going to help us run the diner? She asked, her voice tight with worry. I promised I'd come home every weekend, and I kept that promise religiously. I sent them money for my campus jobs, working as a barista in the mornings and an administrative assistant 3 evenings a week, just to keep their lights on and the diner's doors open. Kyle enrolled at a community college the year after I started university, mostly because Mom pressured him into it. He lasted exactly 1 semester before dropping out, claiming college just wasn't his thing. For the next several years, he drifted between pizza delivery jobs and warehouse gigs, living rent-free in my old bedroom while I juggled classes, work, and sending checks home. Every time he quit or got fired, Mom had an excuse ready. He's figuring himself out, Nora. You need to be more supportive. I was supportive. For far, far too long. After graduating with my degree in marketing, I landed a position as a digital marketing analyst at a mid-sized tech company in downtown Portland. My starting salary was more than anyone in my family had ever earned, and the first thing I did with my first real paycheck was pay off a $3,000 loan my parents had taken out to repair the diner's ancient stove. I thought I was helping them get back on their feet, but looking back, I was really just making it easier for them to keep depending on me instead of standing on their own. That's when I met Garrett Sullivan. He was an engineer at a startup across the street from my office, and we met at a networking mixer I almost didn't attend. Garrett was steady, dependable, and refreshingly straightforward. He came from a family that treated me with genuine warmth and respect, something I wasn't used to experiencing. His parents asked about my work, my goals, my interests, not just what I could do for them. When Garrett noticed how often my family called asking for money, he gently encouraged me to start setting boundaries. You're not their personal bank, Nora, he'd say carefully. But I'd always make excuses. They need me. I can't just abandon them. He'd sigh but never pushed too hard, respecting that I had to come to that realization on my own. The real tension exploded when Garrett and I announced our engagement at a family dinner. My parents offered tight, forced smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Kyle barely looked up from his phone before muttering, "So you're marrying up now, huh?" Garrett wasn't wealthy, just responsible and hardworking, but in Kyle's distorted view, anyone who had their life together was somehow a threat to him. About a month after our engagement announcement, my parents called asking for $8,000 to upgrade the diner's equipment and expand the menu. When I explained that I couldn't afford to hand over that much money right before paying for a wedding, Mom's voice went cold. "Don't you dare forget who raised you and sacrificed everything for you." The guilt crashed over me like a wave, and despite Garrett's protests, I transferred the money. I told myself it was the last time, but deep down, I knew that wasn't true. Kyle's resentment grew more obvious with every wedding decision Garrett and I made. He complained bitterly about not being chosen as my man of honor or best man equivalent. He made snide comments about Garrett's family being stuck up and thinking they're better than us, twisting every polite interaction into an imagined insult. He even had the audacity to criticize our choice of venue, our menu, our guest list, everything. When I refused to buy him a $2,000 designer suit for the wedding, saying he could wear something nice he already owned or rent something affordable, he looked at me with genuine contempt. "Wow, guess your love comes with a price tag now," he sneered. My parents immediately took his side, calling me selfish and ungrateful for not wanting to help my own brother look good at my wedding. That's when I should have seen the warning signs flashing bright red. 2 weeks before the wedding, I was reviewing my finances and double-checking that everything was in order when I noticed something disturbing. There was $5,000 missing from an old joint savings account I'd opened with my parents years ago, back when I was in college, and wanted to help them have emergency funds. I'd mostly forgotten about the account since I'd opened my own separate accounts after graduation, but I'd left that money there as a safety net for them. I called the bank. And my stomach dropped when they explained that my mother had made a large withdrawal and transfer. When I confronted my parents that evening, Dad couldn't look me in the eye. Mom folded her arms defensively and said, "Kyle was in serious trouble, Nora. He owed money to some people who weren't asking nicely anymore. We had to pay off his gambling debts. What were we supposed to do? Let him get hurt? Family helps family when it matters." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. That money was supposed to be for genuine emergencies, not to enable Kyle's self-destructive behavior. "You could have asked me," I said, my voice shaking. "You could have told me what was happening instead of just taking it." Mom's expression hardened. "You would have said no. You've changed, Nora. Ever since you met Garrett, you've become cold." Kyle's jealousy reached a boiling point in those final days before the wedding. He started calling relatives and family friends, poisoning the well with lies about how Garrett's parents had supposedly insulted our family, made classist remarks, looked down on us. None of it was true, but Kyle was convincing when he wanted to be. The night before the wedding, as I was doing a final check of all the details, my phone buzzed with a text from him. "Enjoy your perfect fantasy life while it lasts. Tomorrow should be interesting." A chill ran down my spine, but I convinced myself it was just Kyle being bitter and dramatic like always. Garrett noticed my expression and asked if everything was okay. "It's fine," I lied, not wanting to worry him. "Just pre-wedding jitters." I should have trusted my instincts. I should have known Kyle wouldn't let my happiness go unchallenged. On the morning of the wedding, while I was getting my hair done with my bridesmaids, Mom called. "Honey, I know things have been tense, but Kyle really wants to make a toast at the reception," she pleaded. "It would mean so much to him, and it might help mend things between you two. Please, Nora, let him do this one thing." Against my better judgment, and hoping that maybe, just maybe, Kyle would rise to the occasion and be genuine for once, I agreed. It was the biggest mistake I could have made. The ceremony itself was absolutely beautiful, everything I'd dreamed of. White peonies and roses everywhere, string lights twinkling overhead as the sun set, an acoustic guitarist playing softly as I walked down the aisle. Garrett's eyes filled with tears when he saw me, and for those precious moments, I actually believed that maybe my family drama could be set aside for one perfect day. During our vows, I looked out at the guests and saw my parents dabbing their eyes, and even Kyle looked calm, almost peaceful. I let myself hope. The reception started wonderfully. People were laughing, dancing, eating the Italian food we'd carefully selected. Garrett and I had our first dance to "The Way You Look Tonight," and I felt like I was floating. My bridesmaids gave sweet, funny toasts. Garrett's best man told embarrassing stories that had everyone in stitches. Then the DJ announced that my brother wanted to say a few words. Kyle walked up to grab the microphone, and something about his smile made my stomach clench. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who'd been planning something, waiting for their moment. He cleared his throat dramatically, raised his glass of champagne, and began. To my big sister Nora, the one who worked so hard to escape her embarrassing family that she forgot we even existed. The one who plays the hero while treating the people who raised her like garbage. The room went dead silent. I felt Garrett tense beside me, his hand reaching for mine. Before I could process what was happening, before anyone could stop him, Kyle shook his champagne bottle violently and popped the cork, spraying it directly at me. The cold, sticky liquid soaked through my lace gown, plastering my carefully styled hair to my face. Some guests gasped. Others looked away in embarrassment. A few people even laughed nervously, unsure if this was some kind of planned stunt, but Kyle wasn't done. Not even close. He stormed toward the elaborate 3-tier wedding cake, the beautiful creation we'd spent hours selecting, with delicate sugar flowers and elegant piping, and slammed both hands into it, smashing it onto the floor in an explosion of frosting and cake crumbs. "You think you're better than us," he screamed, his face red with rage and something else. Maybe jealousy, maybe years of festering resentment. "Let's see how perfect your fancy new life is now. Let's see if your rich husband still wants you when you're covered in the mess you came from." I stood there frozen, champagne dripping from my hair and dress, watching chunks of my wedding cake scattered across the venue floor. My heart was hammering so hard I thought everyone could hear it. The entire room stared in shocked silence. This was my wedding day. This was supposed to be the happiest moment of my life, and my own brother had turned it into a nightmare. My parents rushed forward, but not toward me. Not to check if I was okay, not to apologize, not to shield me from further humiliation. They rushed to Kyle, grabbing his arms as he stood there breathing hard, looking almost proud of what he'd done. "He's just upset," Nora, Mom said quickly, loud enough for people nearby to hear. "Don't make this worse than it already is. He's family. You know how he gets." Garrett moved to shield me, his jaw clenched with fury, but I held up my hand. Something had shifted inside me. I wasn't going to cry, wasn't going to scream, wasn't going to give Kyle or my parents the satisfaction of breaking me down. "No," I said quietly, my voice surprisingly steady. "Let them show everyone exactly who they are. Let them finish." The silence that followed was deafening. Every single person at that reception was staring, waiting to see what would happen next. Champagne dripped steadily from the hem of my ruined gown, forming a small puddle at my feet. My carefully applied makeup was probably streaked and running. The beautiful cake that was supposed to be cut and shared with our guests was destroyed on the floor. And my parents were still holding on to Kyle like he was the victim in all this. I turned slowly to face our guests, friends, coworkers, extended family members, people who'd traveled from across the country to celebrate with us. I looked at each section of the room, making sure everyone saw my face, saw my calm expression, saw that I wasn't collapsing. Then I spoke, my voice carrying clearly in the silent room. "I think that's enough celebration for today. Thank you all for coming." Without another word, without looking back at my parents or my brother, I turned and walked out of the reception hall. Garrett was right beside me, his arm around my shoulders. Behind us, I could hear confused murmuring, people asking what they should do, whether they should leave. I heard Mom calling my name, her voice pitched high with panic. I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. I just kept walking toward the exit, my ruined dress trailing behind me, leaving the wreckage of my wedding reception and my relationship with my family in pieces on the floor. The next morning, I woke up in the hotel suite Garrett and I were supposed to have spent our wedding night celebrating in. Instead, I'd cried myself to sleep while he held me, both of us still processing the horror of what had happened. My phone had 17 missed calls from my mother and 3 voicemails from Kyle that I hadn't listened to yet. Garrett was already awake, sitting by the window with his laptop, and he looked at me with such concern and love that I almost started crying again. "Check your bank account," he said quietly. "I got a notification about unusual activity on one of your cards." My hands were shaking as I logged into my banking app. There it was, a transfer of $4,000 from my checking account, authorized through that old joint account access my parents still technically had. The note on the transfer said, "Legal fees for Kyle, urgent." They'd done it again. Even after everything that happened the night before, they'd taken more money from me. For Kyle's legal fees. For whatever trouble he'd gotten himself into this time. That was it. That was the moment something inside me snapped cleanly in half. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. Completely, utterly done. I called the bank immediately and closed every single account that my parents had any access to. I blocked their phone numbers. I blocked Kyle's number. I changed my emergency contacts at work. I called my HR department and had them remove my parents from any beneficiary lists. Garrett watched me methodically burn every bridge, and instead of trying to talk me out of it, he simply asked, "What else do you need me to help you with?" "They've taken enough," he said when I finally stopped making calls and sat down exhausted. "They've taken your money, your time, your energy, your peace of mind, and now they tried to take your wedding day. You don't owe them anything else." He was right. For the first time in my life, I saw clearly how much I'd been sacrificing, how much I'd been giving to people who saw me as a resource to exploit rather than a person to love. 3 days later, Kyle left a voicemail. I couldn't help myself, I listened to it. His voice dripped with sarcasm and fake innocence. "So this is how you treat family? Block us all, cut us off, pretend we don't exist? Real mature, Nora. You're going to regret this. Nobody abandons family and gets away with it. You'll come crawling back eventually, and we might not be there when you do." I saved the voicemail, not because his threats scared me, but because I wanted proof. I wanted a record of exactly who these people were, in case I ever felt myself weakening. Weeks turned into months. My parents stopped trying to call once they realized the money had genuinely stopped flowing. Kyle's gambling spiraled even further without his safety net. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard he'd lost his apartment and had to move back in with our parents, taking whatever odd jobs he could find, delivery driving, warehouse work, anything that would pay cash under the table. Part of me felt a twinge of something, not quite guilt, but maybe sadness for what could have been if he'd ever taken responsibility for himself. Meanwhile, Garrett and I focused on building our actual life together. We both threw ourselves into our careers. I got promoted twice in 18 months. We took a quiet, healing honeymoon in Bar Harbor, Maine, walking along rocky beaches and eating fresh lobster and finally relaxing for the first time in what felt like years. We started saving money for a dream we'd talked about, opening our own small restaurant, something we'd run together with integrity and respect, everything my parents' diner never managed to be. 1 year and 4 months after the wedding, a letter arrived at our apartment. I recognized my mother's handwriting on the envelope immediately. My first instinct was to throw it away unopened, but Garrett said I should at least read it, just to know where things stood. So I did. The letter was 3 pages long, but there wasn't a single genuine apology anywhere in it. Just excuses, justifications, and ultimately, another request. "Kyle has been struggling badly since you cut us off. He's your brother, Nora. He needs help getting back on his feet. We're all family, and family doesn't abandon each other no matter what. I know you're hurt, but you need to be the bigger person here. That's what responsible people do." I read it twice, just to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding. Then I folded it carefully, slipped it into a drawer in my desk, and never responded. I didn't respond the second time she wrote, either, or the third. Eventually, the letters stopped coming. 2 years after the wedding disaster, Garrett and I finally opened our restaurant, a cozy farm-to-table place in Northeast Portland called Bennett and Sullivan's. It was intimate, with only 16 tables, exposed brick walls, and a menu that changed with the seasons. We poured everything we'd learned, everything we'd saved, and everything we believed about treating people with dignity into that space. Our staff became like family, but healthy family, the kind that respected boundaries and showed up for each other without keeping score. The restaurant did well. Really well. Food bloggers loved us. We got written up in Portland Monthly. Lines formed outside on weekend evenings. And through it all, not once did I contact my parents to tell them about our success. Not once did I invite them to see what I'd built. They'd had years to be proud of me, to support me, to see me as something other than a wallet with legs. They'd made their choice. I did think about them sometimes, usually late at night when I couldn't sleep. I'd wonder if Kyle ever got his life together. I'd wonder if my parents ever realized what they'd lost by choosing him over me again and again. I'd wonder if they told people their version of the story, painting me as the ungrateful daughter who abandoned her struggling family. But those thoughts would pass, and I'd remember champagne dripping down my wedding dress, my brother's hands destroying my cake, my mother telling me not to make things worse, as if I was the problem. Garrett and I talked about having kids eventually, and I knew that when we did, they'd never meet my parents or Kyle. That might sound harsh to people who haven't lived through what I lived through, but I was absolutely certain. I would not expose children I brought into this world to people who thought love meant obligation, who thought family meant having the right to take and take without ever giving back. My kids would grow up knowing they were valued for who they were, not what they could provide. On the third anniversary of our wedding, the one that ended in disaster, Garrett surprised me with a vow renewal ceremony. It was tiny, just our closest friends and his family, held in the small garden behind our restaurant. This time, there was no drama. No one ruined anything. We cut a beautiful cake together, and everyone actually got to eat it. We danced. We laughed. We celebrated genuine love and respect and partnership. Afterward, as we sat together under string lights with glasses of wine, Garrett asked me if I ever regretted how I'd handled things with my family. I thought about it honestly. No, I said finally. I regret not doing it sooner. I regret all the years I spent trying to fix people who didn't want to be fixed. But walking away? Choosing my own peace? That's the best decision I ever made besides marrying you. Friends sometimes asked why I didn't fight back that night at the wedding, why I didn't yell at Kyle or confront my parents in front of everyone. Some thought I should have had him arrested, or at least thrown out immediately. But I'd learned something powerful in my silence that night. When you argue with people who are determined to make you the villain, you give them ammunition. When you cry and scream, they get to say you're unstable, dramatic, overreacting. When you stay calm and simply walk away, you take away their power. You let their actions speak for themselves. 4 years after that disastrous wedding, I was in the restaurant early one morning doing inventory when Garrett came in looking concerned, holding his phone. Nora, I just got a message from someone I haven't talked to in years, that friend of yours from college, Stephanie. She says your mother has been trying to reach you. Apparently, your father had a heart attack. He's okay, recovering, but she thought you should know. I stood there in the quiet restaurant, surrounded by the life I'd built, and waited for the wave of guilt to crash over me. For the voice in my head to scream that I should drop everything and rush to the hospital, that I should forgive and forget because life is short and family is forever. But that wave never came. Instead, I felt calm. Sad, maybe, but calm. Do you want to go see him? Garrett asked carefully, not pushing either direction. I thought about it genuinely, not out of obligation, but out of honest consideration. I thought about my dad, who'd always been weaker-willed than my mom, but had still chosen to enable Kyle's behavior for decades. I thought about whether his heart attack changed anything about the pattern of our relationship, whether his medical crisis somehow erased years of being used and dismissed. The answer was no. Sympathy doesn't require sacrifice. Compassion doesn't mean returning to toxicity. I'll send flowers, I said finally, and a card wishing him well. But I'm not going there, and I'm not opening that door again. Garrett nodded, understanding completely. We'd been through this conversation before, preparing for this exact kind of moment. He'd asked me once what I'd do if there was a family emergency, and now we both had our answer. I could care about my father's health without subjecting myself to my mother's manipulation or Kyle's inevitable presence. I sent an elegant flower arrangement to the hospital with a card that said simply, "Wishing you a full recovery. Nora." I didn't include my phone number. I didn't write "call me" or "let's talk." It was a gesture of basic human decency, nothing more. Stephanie texted back a few hours later saying the flowers had arrived and my mom had cried when she saw them. I didn't respond. Their emotions weren't my responsibility to manage anymore. About a month later, a woman came into the restaurant for dinner with her husband. I was greeting tables that night, something I liked to do when we weren't too slammed, and when I approached their table, she looked at me with startled recognition. Nora? Nora Bennett? I'm Carol. I used to work at your parents' diner years ago, before you opened this place. Wow, this is beautiful. You've done so well for yourself. We chatted briefly, and inevitably, she asked about my family. How are your parents? Is the diner still open? I gave her my practiced answer, the one I'd developed for exactly these situations. We're not in touch anymore, but I hope they're well. Carol's expression shifted to understanding and something else, maybe admiration. Good for you, she said quietly. I remember how much they relied on you. Sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is walk away. That conversation stayed with me because Carol was right, and because it reinforced something I'd learned through all of this. Other people can see your dysfunction even when you're too close to it to recognize it yourself. The people who witnessed my family's behavior over the years, the ones who saw how I was treated versus how Kyle was coddled, they understood. They didn't judge me for leaving. If anything, they wondered why it took me so long. These days, when people ask me about my wedding, because some of our regular customers have heard bits of the story through Portland's tight-knit food scene, I tell them the truth. I don't embellish or dramatize it. I just explain what happened. My brother destroyed my wedding reception in a jealous rage. My parents defended him instead of me, and I walked away from all of them. Some people are shocked. Some ask if I've tried to reconcile. But increasingly, people just nod and say something like, "That must have been incredibly hard, but good for you for choosing yourself." Garrett and I are expecting our first child, now a daughter. We've been talking about names, planning the nursery, taking birthing classes. My mother-in-law asks sometimes if I've thought about reaching out to my parents, about whether I want my daughter to know her grandparents on my side. The answer is still no. My daughter will have grandparents, Garrett's parents, who've treated me with more genuine love and respect than my own parents ever did. She'll have uncles and aunts and cousins who know how to love without conditions. She won't grow up feeling like she has to earn affection by being useful to— I think about that night at my wedding sometimes, standing there drenched in champagne while my brother screamed at me and my parents prioritized him over me one final time. I think about how everyone waited for me to explode, to match his rage with my own. But my silence that night wasn't shock or weakness like everyone assumed. It was clarity. It was the moment I finally saw clearly that nothing I did would ever be enough for them, that no amount of money or sacrifice or bending myself into shapes would make them treat me with basic respect and appreciation. That silence was power. It was control. It was me deciding that I didn't need to defend myself against people who'd already decided I was wrong. It was me choosing to simply leave the battlefield entirely rather than continuing to fight a war I could never win. And every single person at that wedding saw exactly what kind of people my family were. I didn't have to say a word. They revealed themselves completely. Now, when people ask why I didn't fight back that night, I smile and tell them the truth. I didn't need to. They showed everyone who they really were all on their own. And that's exactly what happened. My brother's champagne, his screaming, his destroyed cake, all of it became the moment I was finally free. The day I stopped trying to save people who didn't want to be saved. The day I chose peace over obligation. Sometimes liberation looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like walking away while everyone watches. Sometimes it looks like closing doors and never looking back, even when people tell you that real family doesn't do that. But real family doesn't treat you the way I was treated either. Real family doesn't see you as an ATM. Real family doesn't destroy your wedding and expect you to forgive them because that's what family does. I'm building something better now. A life where love doesn't come with price tags and conditions. A family, the one I've chosen and the one I'm creating, where people show up for each other out of genuine care, not obligation or guilt. A restaurant filled with respect and dignity instead of resentment. A marriage built on partnership instead of servitude. And soon, a daughter who'll grow up knowing she's valued simply for existing, not for what she can provide. That's what came from the champagne and the smashed cake and the silence. That's what came from walking away. Freedom. Peace. A life that's finally, genuinely mine. And I wouldn't change a single thing.